Hey everybody, here we here. Excited for another week. And this discussion for this week is the topic is what ways does physical appearance affect first impressions during interactions, and how are expectations and judgments of physical appearance fair or unfair to people involved? I want to start with one of the readings from chapter 5 this week in different dimensions, nonverbal communication and culture. And one of the more simple but relevant concepts that I read from this reading states that physical appearance is the most obvious form of nonverbal conversation. So basically, of course, we've talked about nonverbal communication this week, but when we're talking about physical appearance in general, or specifically actually, and how that affects our first impressions of a person, well, first, physical appearance, as we said, is the most obvious thing we can do to gather information about a person. And I believe that in any given situation, humans naturally want to gather as much information about people, the things, and all of the components of any given situation. And so naturally, we begin with trying to read the people in the room, for example, or read the people at an event, or any kind of social interaction involving other people, especially ones we don't know or people we don't understand, or situations we don't understand. We have a natural tendency from experience and also just from reading, we have a natural tendency to try to understand and gather as much information about a person. And we do this, I believe, because we're trying to anticipate their actions or anticipate their reactions, maybe their reaction to you or their reaction to a given situation, or if you prompted them with the conversation starter, or whatever the case may be in any given scenario. We want to try to anticipate what a person is going to do or how a situation is going to play out. And we use our biases or our built up knowledge from other previous interactions, or how we were told or taught to be by the people who raised us, or people in our communities, our families, our culture. We use that information to try to read a situation and guess what's going to happen. As I mentioned, we're trying to gather as much information as possible. And the issue with this can be that we're making assumptions about a person or a group of people without using language or another way of communicating to truly understand who they are. And so that kind of takes us into whether it's fair or unfair. So our answer is kind of in the question. How are expectations, judgments of a physical appearance fair or unfair? Well, the issue is that we're trying to gather, or we're trying to form a solid expectation, or we're trying to judge a person off of how they look. And I don't think that's necessarily accurate. In most situations, people are trying to understand whether safety is going to be compromised, or, for example, or if they're going to be compatible with the person simply by looking at them. And I don't believe that the person's compatibility, for example, should be judged solely on a person's looks, because you never know what a person may be like. You can't necessarily, now you may, I think it's fair, basically, for example, if someone has on a Superman shirt and you like Superman, it may be fair to try to assume that that person likes something that I like. We have a common trait, or a common like, or we have something in common that makes us relatable. For example, something simple. But when we start talking about how some individuals are judging people based on the color of their skin, or their gender, or their orientation, or how they identify, we begin to kind of get back to some of the topics that we covered in the earlier weeks from our readings, which is how this comes down to an individual's ability to accurately or inaccurately assign gender roles, assign certain characteristics to certain groups of people or to an individual. It comes down to their biases. So in the end, I believe that physical appearance, as mentioned in the book, is the most obvious form of nonverbal communication. So it's going to affect our interactions and first impressions, because it's the first thing that we're able to see. But when we're talking about our expectations of people, when we're talking about how we judge individuals, I think that it's unfair or fair based on the person involved and how they usually interact with people who are different from them or who are a stranger to them, or if they've never had the chance to meet someone from their background or understand other cultures. If they are more likely to be welcome and open to that thing, then I believe they're more likely to be fair. But as we know, some people are going to be unfair based on their own biases.